Something shattered in the kitchen. A glass, maybe a wine bottle, but I barely registered the noise. Because her laughter cut through it a second later. Not the polite kind. Not the kind you use with old friends. It was the soft, breathless kind. The one I hadn't heard from her in months. Maybe years. And it wasn't meant for me. I had only stepped outside to take a phone call. Barely 5 minutes. A call I didn't even want. But when I came back in through the side door, they didn't hear me. No one did. They thought I was still gone. That's when I saw them, framed in the hallway like a painting hung too low. Her back arched slightly as she leaned toward him, his hand on the wall beside her head. Their bodies not touching, but hovering. Familiar. Almost practiced. No one else at the party was in that part of the house. Everyone else was in the living room, too loud, too drunk, too distracted by trivia and tequila shots to notice what was happening 20 feet away behind a half-shut door. She said something to him, too low for me to catch. He smiled. A slow, knowing kind of smile. And just like that, the room spun, but I stood still. I didn't speak. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Because that was the moment I realized the distance I'd been feeling for months wasn't in my head. It was in her hands. On his chest. Right there in front of me. My fingers clenched around the phone in my pocket like it might anchor me. I wanted to walk away. I wanted to walk in. I wanted to scream. But instead, I blinked. Just once. And when I opened my eyes again, they were gone. Gone. As if they had never stood there. As if I imagined the whole thing. Like it was a scene written just for me. And someone tore the page out before I could show it to anyone else. When I finally rejoined the others, she was back on the couch, curled up under a blanket, laughing at something someone said about a board game rule. She looked at me like nothing had happened, kissed my cheek absently, like I was her safe place. I sat down beside her. My body obeyed. My mind didn't, because now I had a question. A simple one, but one that would take weeks, maybe months, to answer completely. When did my wife stop being my wife and become someone else entirely? The drive home was quiet, but not the kind that feels peaceful. It was the kind where every tick of the turn signal sounds like a warning. I kept one hand on the wheel, the other resting in my lap, and stared straight ahead, pretending not to notice how she looked out the window like the night was more interesting than the silence between us. Faye had a way of folding herself into stillness when she didn't want to answer questions. No fidgeting, no foot tapping, just that dead calm that made you feel like you'd imagined the whole thing. That night, she was so still it was like she wasn't even in the car. I didn't ask about Chase. I didn't mention what I saw. I wasn't ready to say it out loud, not because I doubted it, but because I already knew what her answer would be. You're being paranoid. Or worse, that didn't happen. And I needed more than a hallway whisper and a smirk to survive that kind of lie. When we got home, she disappeared into the bathroom and stayed there for nearly 20 minutes. Long enough to wash away everything I wasn't supposed to see. When she came out, she smiled and tossed her heels by the door like any regular Thursday. You okay? She asked, with just enough tilt in her voice to sound sincere. I nodded. I even smiled. And that's when I knew I was starting to lie too. The next day, I left work early. I didn't tell her. I didn't text. I drove to her office, parked 2 blocks away, and watched. Not out of jealousy. Not out of revenge. I just needed to see her in a setting that wasn't filtered through our house, our habits, our well-practiced routines. I wanted to see if she looked different when she thought I wasn't looking. And she did. Around 4:15, she stepped out with Chase. They weren't holding hands. They weren't touching. But they moved like people who'd memorized each other's pace. Like gravity pulled them closer, but manners held them apart. They walked down the block, stopped at a bakery, and stood shoulder to shoulder while waiting for iced coffees. And then it happened. She turned slightly, smiled at him, and, for a split second, her eyes closed. Just a beat too long. The kind of smile you don't give coworkers. The kind that says, I remember last night, without saying a word. When they left, they split off in different directions. She walked back to the office. He crossed the street. It was all so careful, so curated. It made my stomach turn. I went home and sat in our living room for hours, staring at the framed photo from our 5th anniversary in May. Her hair was shorter then, her eyes softer. That version of her was still mine. But the woman who came home that night, asking what I wanted for dinner like she hadn't just smiled like that at someone else, she was a stranger wearing Faye's face. Still, I said nothing, because I didn't want to be wrong. Or maybe I didn't want to be right. But I wasn't the only one noticing things. 2 days later, something else shifted. We were at her sister's baby shower, just a backyard thing, mostly women. I was one of the few husbands invited, probably out of politeness. I kept to myself near the lemonade pitcher, watching the kids chase each other around plastic lawn chairs. Her cousin Taryn approached me, holding a half-eaten cupcake, and said casually, "So, you and Faye still doing okay?" I blinked. "Yeah. What?" She shrugged. "No reason. Just, I noticed she's been real close with that Chase guy lately. I figured she would have told you about him." "She has," I said. Line number 2. My voice cracked slightly, and I hoped she didn't notice. Taryn nodded slowly, chewing her lip like she wanted to say something else. Then she walked away without another word. I stood there a long time, the lemonade sweating in my hand, my thoughts louder than the screaming toddlers. That was the moment I realized something else. I wasn't chasing the truth anymore. It was already circling me, and it was only a matter of time before it landed. After that weekend, something in me broke, but not loudly. It was a quiet break, the kind that doesn't bleed. I stopped trying to fix things in my head. I stopped defending her in my thoughts. I started watching, really watching. And once I did, the cracks spread like veins under glass. On Monday, she came home an hour late and said there was traffic. I nodded and offered her leftover risotto, which she barely touched. She didn't even ask about my day. She hadn't in a while, but I noticed it now. I studied her face while she scrolled through her phone at the table, the soft blue light dancing in her eyes, making her look younger than she had that morning. She laughed at something on her screen and tilted it away from my view, so subtly it could have been instinct. But it wasn't. It was habit. That night, I opened a blank notes app and started logging everything. Not because I wanted to expose her. Not yet. But because I needed proof I wasn't crazy. Tuesday, she had a working dinner with a client. She got home at 11:07 p.m. I checked my log. Her dress was different than what she wore when she left. The one she returned in was more fitted, deeper blue, and I had never seen it before. I asked if she had changed at the office. She blinked. "What? No, I wore this all day." I didn't argue. I just smiled and said it looked nice. Line number 3, for me this time. I hated that dress. I started noticing things in the bedroom too. Her drawer was rearranged. New perfume. Her phone never left her side, even when she went to the bathroom. She turned off previews on her lock screen. She added a passcode she never used to bother with. And one night, while she was asleep, I leaned over, not to snoop, but to look at her. Really look at her. And I saw it. She smiled in her sleep. Not the twitchy dream smile. No, it was soft. Real. Familiar in a way that didn't belong to me anymore. The next morning, I asked her if she wanted to go hiking that weekend, something we used to do before everything got strange. She hesitated. Too long. Then said, "Maybe next weekend. Work's a little wild right now." But that Saturday, while she thought I was on a grocery run, I parked a block away and waited. At 11:23 a.m., I watched her come out of the house, dressed in jeans and a jacket she hadn't worn in months. She looked effortlessly thrown together, like someone preparing to meet a man who had already seen her at her worst and wanted more anyway. She didn't drive to the office. She drove downtown, parked in a lot near the waterfront, and walked 3 blocks to a cafe. Not the busy kind. One of those tucked away, trendy ones with ivy on the windows and exposed brick. A place where people don't go to be found. I sat across the street in my car. The seat leaned back far enough to be unseen, but forward enough to watch everything unfold. At 12:01, Chase walked in. She was already there, 2 coffees on the table. They didn't hug. They didn't kiss. But he reached over and tucked a piece of hair behind her ear before sitting down. And that was worse. Because that wasn't seduction. That was routine. They talked for over an hour. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I watched her laugh. I watched her lean in. I watched her be a version of herself I hadn't seen in so long. It felt like I was watching someone I once loved through a museum glass. Untouchable, already gone. When they left, they didn't walk side by side like friends. He let her go a few steps ahead. She didn't look back. It was like they knew someone might be watching. That night, back home, she climbed into bed and asked if I'd mind folding laundry the next morning. I nodded and said sure, even though I already knew I wouldn't be there. Because that was the moment I decided. Not to confront her. Not yet. But to vanish for a little while, just long enough for her to feel the silence. Because I needed to know something deeper than if she was cheating. I needed to know if she'd even notice I was gone. Sunday morning, I left before the sun came up. I didn't take much, just a duffel bag, my laptop, my passport. Don't ask why. I wasn't thinking clearly. And my journal, where I'd begun scribbling in the margins of truth and denial. I didn't text. I didn't write a note. I wanted to know how long it would take before she noticed I wasn't beside her. Not just physically, emotionally. Presently, I drove west, past the city, past the suburbs, and kept going until the sky cracked open over the ocean. I checked into a budget hotel on a cliff, the kind with spotty Wi-Fi and faded curtains. The woman at the front desk gave me a double room with one key and didn't ask questions. I didn't offer any. I didn't tell anyone where I was, not even my brother, who normally gets a text if I go off-grid for more than a few hours. I turned my phone on silent and faced its screen down on the nightstand. Faye didn't call. Not that hour. Not that day. Not even the next. Instead, late Monday night, I got one short text from her. Did you forget I have that insurance appointment tomorrow? You still have the paperwork in your glove box. No, where are you? No, are you okay? Just a polite tap on the glass to remind me she still needed something from me. I didn't respond. Instead, I wrote a list in my journal, not of what she had done, but of what I had let slide. The list was long. It wasn't filled with smoking guns or dramatic reveals. It was full of quiet things. Things you excuse when you're in love. The way she stopped laughing at my jokes. The way she flinched when I touched her waist in the kitchen. How she always corrected me when I told a story wrong. Not out of accuracy, but out of control. And then I wrote a second list. What I wanted her to feel if I never came back. I wanted her to feel the void of my presence, not the weight of my anger. I wanted her to ask questions, not out of guilt, but out of realization. I wanted her to rewind everything she thought she knew and wonder how long I'd been slipping through her fingers. On the third day, she called. I watched the screen light up. Faye calling. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. Her voice was calm, like she was calling about groceries. Hey Corb, it's me. I noticed you're not home. Not sure what's going on. If you're mad, can we just talk about it? Mad. That was her first assumption. Not worried. Not scared. Just annoyed, like I was being dramatic for attention. She ended with a sigh and a half laugh. Okay, well, just call me back, I guess. I didn't. Instead, I opened a new tab on my laptop and started researching the firm she worked for. I don't know what I was looking for exactly. Maybe something on their team page. Maybe evidence. Maybe confirmation. But what I found made my stomach churn. Their Instagram. I hadn't thought to check it. But there it was, a photo from the prior Friday. A group shot. Team building day, apparently. Taken on a rooftop bar. Everyone smiling. Faye was in the front row. Next to Chase. His hand wasn't on her waist. It was on her hip. Their faces were close. Too close. And she was laughing at something, her head tilted toward him, like he was telling her a secret that made the whole world disappear. The caption read, "Cheers to another strong quarter and the strongest team in the business." I stared at the photo for a long time. Not because it was proof. Not because it hurt. But because I couldn't stop zooming in. Not on her. On me. Or more accurately, the version of me that used to exist in those photos, back when I used to be the one standing next to her. She didn't delete me from her life. She simply replaced me, frame by frame. That night, I wrote a letter. Not to her, not yet. To myself. The version of me who kept holding the door open, hoping she'd walk back through as the woman I married. But she was already gone, and I was finally ready to see it. By day 4, she started to realize I wasn't just sulking. That evening, while the ocean outside my hotel window howled through a cold front, I got a text I read over and over again. Corbin, please call me. You're scaring me. There was no period after that sentence. She always left her messages open-ended when she was unsure. I used to think that was poetic. Now it read like guilt trying to format itself politely. Still, I didn't call. Instead, I went down to the beach just before sunset and watched the waves pound against the rocks like they were trying to remind the cliffs who was really in charge. It was the kind of loneliness that didn't hurt. It clarified. I realized something strange out there, wrapped in sea wind and self-abandonment. I wasn't heartbroken. Not exactly. I was relieved. Relieved that I wasn't wrong. Relieved that I wasn't crazy. Relieved to finally be free of pretending everything was okay just because it looked okay in pictures. She called again that night. This time I picked up. Her voice was different. Softer. Too soft. Like someone trying to calm a dog before putting it down. "Hey," she said. "Hey. You're alive." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I was starting to think you'd joined a cult." I didn't bite. "You noticed I was gone." "Of course I noticed, Corbin. You ghosted me." I was worried. "Were you?" Silence. Then, "Can you just tell me what's going on?" And there it was, the thing I'd been waiting to hear. Not because I needed to tell her, but because I needed to see if she'd ask the right way. I gave her nothing. Just a long inhale. And then, "When's the last time you told me the truth about anything?" Her pause told me everything I needed to know. "What are you talking about?" "You and Chase." Now she didn't even fake it. "What about him?" "I saw you." A beat. Then her voice cracked in a way I didn't expect. "You saw what?" "Enough." I could feel her scrambling to calculate which lie would do the least damage. "Corbin, whatever you think you saw." "Faye, you took off your wedding ring before you met him at the cafe." She exhaled slowly, and in that breath, the last of her alibis disintegrated. I don't know what I expected in that moment. An apology? A breakdown? A confession that would twist the knife so deeply it would pierce through to some kind of clarity? Instead, she asked, "Are you coming home?" That was the real question. Not, "Do you still love me?" Not, "Can we fix this?" Just, "Will you come back and keep pretending like this never happened?" And here's the part one still don't know how to explain. I said yes. Not because I forgave her. Not because I believed in redemption. But because I needed to see what happened when the curtain dropped and the audience went home. I needed to sit in the quiet wreckage of what we used to be and study the shape of what was left. I told her I'd be home the next morning. She said, "Okay," like she'd won something. But neither of us realized yet. The version of me walking back into that house wasn't the man who left. He was gone, and in his place was someone who had nothing left to lose. The moment I turned my key in the door, I knew the air inside that house would feel different. Not colder, not warmer. Just stranger. Like someone had rearranged everything an inch to the left while I was gone. The living room lamp was on, casting its usual amber glow across the hardwood, but the space felt thinner, like it had been stretched to fit something that no longer lived here. She was sitting on the edge of the couch, exactly where I expected her to be. Legs crossed, hands in her lap, a practiced expression on her face that said, "I'm calm. I'm ready. I'm innocent enough to talk, but just mysterious enough to deny." Her phone was face down on the coffee table, a small, silent admission that she was choosing to be present. "Hey," she said. "Hey." I walked past her without touching her, sat in the chair across from the couch. The space between us felt like miles. There was no welcome home hug, no relieved kiss, just the soft hum of the air purifier in the corner that kept pretending everything was clean. She cleared her throat. "So, are we going to talk?" I tilted my head. "About what?" She blinked. "Don't do that." I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. "Do what?" "Make this harder than it already is." "I'm not making it anything," I said. "I'm just sitting here, waiting for you to be honest." Her lips parted like she was about to say something rehearsed, something like, "It wasn't what it looked like," or "We were just close, emotionally." But to her credit, she didn't go there. Instead, she said, "I didn't plan it. It just happened." The words dropped like a glass sliding off a counter. Not shattered, just inevitable. "How long?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked toward the hallway like the answer might be hiding in the shadows. "A few months. Since March." She flinched. "Maybe earlier." "I don't know." "You don't know?" I repeated quietly, like I was testing the weight of the phrase. She shifted, visibly uncomfortable. "It wasn't like a thing. Not like you think." "No? What kind of thing was it, Faye?" My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The flatness cut deeper. She ran her hands through her hair, suddenly smaller than she'd ever seemed. "It was emotional at first. We talked. I confided in him. About us." "There it is," I whispered. She looked up. "What?" "That sentence. About us. You cheated on me by using us as currency." She didn't argue. I leaned forward slightly. "Did you tell him I was cold? Absent? Boring?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. I didn't mean for it to get physical, but it did. "How many times?" Corbin, I. How many? She hesitated. 3. 4. I nodded slowly. Okay. Okay, she echoed. That's it. I'm not surprised, I said. I watched you change so slowly I thought I was imagining it. But I wasn't. You just stopped loving me and didn't tell me. That's not fair. You're right, I said. It's not. She stood up, arms crossed now, shifting into defense mode. So what happens now? I stood too, not to confront, just to feel my own body again. I walked past her and into the kitchen. It smelled like old toast and lavender dish soap. I opened the fridge, stared at a bottle of wine we used to share, then closed it. You know, I said from the doorway, the worst part isn't that you slept with someone else. It's that you made me doubt myself. For months, every time I felt something was off and you told me I was being dramatic, you were gaslighting me. I didn't mean to. I know, I said. That's the problem. We stood there in the silence of our shared failure. The house didn't feel like mine anymore. I could have been visiting an Airbnb where the host had left a photo of a marriage that once looked real. I'm not staying, I finally said. But I had to come back and hear it from you. Now I have. I picked up the bag I'd left by the door. She didn't stop me. She didn't ask me where I was going. And that silence? That was my real answer. I drove without music. Not out of anger. Just silence. Pure, uninterrupted silence. I didn't want to drown anything out. I wanted to hear the sound of leaving. The real, raw kind. The tires rolling over pavement I didn't plan to return on. It was strange how peaceful it felt. Not empowering. Not victorious. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that follows a storm when you realize your house is still standing, but you can't call it home anymore. I didn't go back to the coast. I didn't even go far. I checked into a motel less than 20 minutes from our place. Close enough to feel the weight of distance, but far enough that her shadow couldn't reach under the door. I paid in cash. I didn't unpack. That first night alone, I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, asking myself the question that people usually skip over when they tell stories like this. Was there a version of this where I could have forgiven her? And the answer terrified me. Because yes, there was. If she'd looked me in the eye that night and told me everything. If she'd fallen apart. If she'd admitted the thing out loud that she'd only confessed to herself in passing glances and lowered voices. That she'd chosen someone else. I might have stayed. But she didn't. She just let me go? As if she didn't know what I was worth anymore. The next morning, I went to a diner I hadn't visited in years. The kind with torn menus and waitresses who called everyone Han. I sat by the window, drank coffee that tasted like metal, and watched couples across the booth share phones and pancakes and inside jokes. I didn't envy them. I didn't feel bitter. I just wondered how many of them were pretending. How many smiles hid betrayals like mine. How many men were sitting across from women they didn't know anymore. By noon, I had 2 missed calls and a text from Faye. Are we really doing this? Just no closure. Closure. As if she hadn't already nailed it shut. I didn't answer. Instead, I visited my parents. They didn't know anything yet. My mom opened the door, looked at my face, and said, "What happened?" "I'm just tired," I said. She didn't push. She just made tea and sat with me like I was a kid again, scared of thunderstorms. We didn't talk about Faye. We talked about memories, my dad's old truck, my high school soccer games, the dog we buried the year before our wedding. It felt like flipping through photos of a life that had belonged to someone else. That night, back in the motel, I got an email. From Chase. Subject line, "I didn't want to do this, but you deserve the truth." It was short, just a few sentences. He said he was sorry, that it was never supposed to happen, that it started as emotional support and drifted into something else. That Faye told him I didn't love her anymore, that she made it sound like we were basically roommates, that she cried the first time they kissed and said it was a mistake, and then did it again the next week. He said he backed off 2 months ago, said she kept texting after that, told him I wasn't home much anymore, asked if he ever thought about her when she wasn't around. He didn't attach screenshots. He didn't need to, because I believed every word. Not because I trusted him, but because I knew her. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark. I felt nothing. No spike of rage. No vindication. No desire to call her and scream. Just a deep, thick sadness. The kind that settles into your bones and makes you forget what warmth used to feel like. Faye didn't want to be caught. She wanted to be rescued from her own boredom. And when I didn't show up fast enough to save her from it, she let someone else. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. No alarm. Just that internal switch that flips when your mind finally matches your body's pace. I sat up, washed my face, and looked at myself in the mirror for longer than I ever had before. I didn't look broken. I didn't look angry. I looked real, like someone who had finally stopped performing the role of husband and started breathing as a man again. I drove back to the house, not to return, just to finish the loop. She was in the kitchen, barefoot, holding her coffee like she hadn't slept much. Her hair was tied up, but messier than usual. Not curated. Not intentional. She looked human for the first time in a long time. "Hi," she said. Small voice. Fragile. I nodded. "Hey. I didn't think you'd come back. I'm not staying." She swallowed hard. I figured. I didn't give a speech. I didn't list all the things she did wrong. I just asked her the one thing that had been sitting on my tongue for days. "Did you ever plan to tell me?" Her eyes welled, but no tears fell. I wanted to. I just didn't want it to be true yet. That was the most honest thing she'd said in a year. I walked past her, into the bedroom. Picked up the last of my things. My old hoodie. My journals. A photo of my dad that sat on my nightstand since college. Before I left, I turned to her and said, "You don't owe me anything anymore. But you owe yourself something. Whatever this was, you can't fix it by blaming the pieces. You have to rebuild something better." She nodded, tears now finally coming. "Are you going to be okay?" And I surprised both of us with my answer. "I already am." I didn't slam the door. I didn't leave a note. I just left. A month passed. Then two. I moved into a small rental north of the city. It had ugly carpet and a view of a parking lot. But it was mine. I started running again. Not to escape. To feel the burn in my legs and remember I was alive. I cooked for myself. I called my brother more. I started journaling again, not to document pain, but to track growth. I even laughed one night. Real laughter. At a bad movie with a neighbor who asked me to join her on a walk so we don't both die of loneliness. She didn't ask about my past. She just talked about the sky. And I realized something no one tells you in stories like these. Healing doesn't look like triumph. It looks like peace. Boring, beautiful peace. Faye never begged me to come back. She never sent long apologies or dramatic letters. But 3 weeks ago, I got a message. Just one sentence. "I hope you're doing well." I mean that. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the need to read between the lines. I smiled. And then I put my phone down, opened the window, and let the air in. Because I wasn't holding my breath anymore. I wasn't waiting for closure. I had become it.